My name is Lila Ashcroft, and I've spent the last decade negotiating hostile mergers, dissecting billion-dollar contracts, and protecting multinational clients from legal ambushes they didn't see coming. I wear pressure like a tailored suit, sharp, composed, and hard to wrinkle. So imagine my surprise when the first true betrayal of my life came not from a corporate boardroom in Tokyo or a shareholder ambush in London, but from inside my own bloodline, right here in the quiet suburbs of Maryland. It began with a text message. Just 4 words. You moved outright. It was from Levi, my cousin. We were never close. He was the type who oversmiled at family events and made a living doing something. I never figured out exactly what. Crypto 1 year, vending machines the next. Always just enough success to brag about, but never enough to pay for the drinks he ordered. At the time, I was living out of a serviced apartment in Shibuya, managing a high-stakes arbitration between a Swiss firm and a Japanese conglomerate. 12-hour days. Time zones stacked like bricks on my schedule. So I didn't answer Levi. I even typed, "What do you mean?" but didn't hit send. 3 days later, I got an email from my property management company. "Hi, Ms. Ashcroft. Just confirming the change of ownership on file for your residence at 1347 Winslow Lane. Please confirm forwarding address for tax documents." I stared at it for a full minute, then reread the subject line. Change of ownership. My residence. Winslow Lane. What the hell? I had bought that house 6 years ago after winning my first case as lead counsel. It was my reward. 3-bedroom brick colonial with an herb garden I never used, and a clawfoot tub that soaked away at least 20 panic attacks. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that I had made it. That, the long nights, the missed birthdays, the meals eaten over case files had added up to something solid. And someone had sold it. I called the property manager immediately. They were polite. Confused? Said everything looked compliant. Signed, notarized, processed through a local real estate firm, Levi referred. They sent me copies of the deed transfer and sale agreement. That's when I saw my signature. Sloppy. Loopy. Wrong. Whoever did it had tried to mimic the way I signed emails, not legal documents. And they must have used an old scan from when I signed a birthday card or an old contract in a rush. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I sat up in my Tokyo apartment with a single light on, reading every document line by line. Then I opened my secure cloud, logged into my archive of legal authorizations, and scrolled until I saw the gold. Durable power of attorney. Unrevoked. Active. Notified. Levi didn't know. They'd forged my name. But I'd never revoked the power of attorney I had granted to my old attorney, Dorian Chen, who was still legally authorized to act on my behalf in all property matters. And Dorian, he owed me more than one favor. Suddenly, I stopped being scared. They'd made their first move, and they thought I wasn't looking. I didn't call Levi. I didn't scream. I did what I do best. I watched. I gathered. I built a case like a net, letting it hang invisible in the dark. The next morning, I smiled on Zoom, delivered my argument to the Tokyo team, and sent a short email to Dorian. "Hey, we need to talk. I'm about to make things very, very messy." That week, I wired Dorian funds, hired a forensic handwriting expert, and requested court-certified copies of the deed filing, all without setting foot in the country, all without saying Levi's name aloud. Not yet. I still remember the sensation. Calm, cold anger. Not loud, not panicked, just contained. I'd spent a decade protecting people who couldn't see threats coming. But this was personal. This was a chess game I hadn't asked for, but was more than prepared to finish. And Levi, he had no idea that I was already moving pieces behind his back. I scrolled through his Instagram. He was grinning next to a leased BMW, tagging it with entrepreneur. I looked at the location. 1347 Winslow Lane. My castle now. Castle. Game on. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this part. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I have to say here. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. I didn't touch Levi right away. That's not how you handle snakes. You don't stomp on them. You wait until they slither into the glass box you've already prepared. So I watched. A week after discovering the forged deed, I had Dorian pull the full timeline of events on record. The deed transfer had gone through 2 months earlier. That meant they'd been enjoying their victory for 8 weeks. Long enough to grow careless. Long enough to start paper trails. I had access to all of it. Now the transaction logs, title, transfer, notary information. It was all technically legal on the surface, but the rot underneath. Obvious. The notary they used had a history of rubber stamping real estate deals for friends. We found 5 similar cases under her record. I flagged them. Quietly. I wasn't building a lawsuit. I was building a reckoning. Levi, meanwhile, kept posting. He redecorated his new home. Replaced the original Spanish tiles I'd imported from Italy with plastic laminate. Tore out the clawfoot tub and turned it into a gaming room. He even posted a reel of him popping champagne in the kitchen. The kitchen I had renovated myself after 6 months of cases in Frankfurt. New beginnings. New mindset. Cut out the old bring in the bold, his caption said. The comments. Full of fire emojis and fake friends cheering him on. My favorite comment was from his girlfriend Trisha. Finally claiming what you deserve, no more hand-me-downs. Hand-me-downs. Oh, honey, you're about to learn what legal ownership means. Meanwhile, I kept my face public. Kept posting sushi pics from Tokyo court sketches from arbitration sunset skyline shots. I made sure anyone watching me thought I was a world away both physically and mentally. But in the background, Dorian and I were turning screws. The forensic analysis came back. Signature was fake, with over 87% deviation from my actual legal documentation. The IP address from the deed scan originated not from my firm's VPN, but from Levi's roommate's co-working space. Amateurs. I had Dorian quietly request an internal audit from the registrar's office citing discrepancy concerns. A routine request. No red flags yet. But once initiated, it froze all pending actions on that property, including refinancing, leasing, and resale. The house was now legally in limbo. Levi wouldn't know it for a few more days. And that's when I received the second email that made me pause. This one was from the tax assessor's office. Dear Miss Ashcroft, please confirm the correct recipient for property tax documents related to 1347 Winslow Lane. Current address on file is still listed under your name. Still under my name. They had filed a fraudulent sale but didn't bother to change the tax forwarding address, which meant I was still financially liable. Levi didn't even know how to file the damn paperwork properly. That slip-up gave me what I needed. A reason to contact the local authorities. Not civil. Criminal. I filed a formal statement, provided notarized samples of my legal signature, my travel logs, and video proof that I was out of the country during the supposed signing. I layered it with screenshots from Levi's own Instagram posts that flaunted his unauthorized occupancy. And then I waited. 3 more days passed. Then I got a call from Levi. I didn't answer. He called again. Then again. Then texted, "Hey, super random, but the house title's frozen. Some issue with your old POA. Can we talk?" There it was. He'd finally tripped the wire. I texted back one line. "You should have left my name off the paperwork, Levi." He called again. I turned off my phone. Back in Tokyo, I sipped my tea and opened a new case file labeled Asset Reclamation. Ashcroft Verschwe. Ashcroft et al. It felt good. Clean. Controlled. I wasn't done yet. But I had their attention now, and I wasn't going to stop until they understood the difference between taking something and legally owning it, between pretending to win and actually surviving the fallout of their own arrogance. Let them sweat. The next time Levi reached out, he tried to play it cool. "Hey, Lila. Hope you're good. Just wanted to clear something up real quick. Some clerical thing with the title office. Not a big deal. Would love to straighten it out. You know, family to family. Family to family." That phrase almost made me laugh out loud. I didn't respond. He followed up with another voice message, his tone more nervous, now strained, with the kind of smile you can hear when someone's trying too hard. "Look, I didn't know there was still a power of attorney active. Maybe we can work something out before this gets complicated." Oh, Levi, it's already complicated. You just haven't seen the paperwork yet. By this point, Dorian had filed a full motion with the court on my behalf, with my standing as grantor of the still active POA requesting the immediate investigation of real estate fraud, falsified documentation, and breach of fiduciary trust. That last one, I added for flavor. It implied Levi held some implied duty of care by being family. I knew it wouldn't stick, but it would make the judge raise an eyebrow, and that was enough. I also knew Trisha had been a co-signer on one of the documents the fraudulent LLC they used to channel the house sale into a shadow account. She'd been looped in more deeply than she realized. I didn't want the house back. I wanted everything attached to it. 3 days later, I touched down in D.C. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. I arrived at night, walked through the airport alone, and took a private car to a hotel downtown. From there, I made one discreet visit to a man named Chris Paxton, an old friend from law school who now worked cyber forensics. Chris greeted me with a crooked grin and a cup of black coffee. "I hear you're about to take your cousin's spine out through his nose," he said. I smiled. Not quite. Just teaching him property law. He slid over a flash drive. Everything Levi touched logged. VPN leaks, keystrokes, false IP masking. And I pulled metadata from the PDF he forged. The timestamp proves it was signed while you were in a deposition in Tokyo, video confirmed. Perfect. With that drive in hand, I walked the block and a half to Dorian's office. We sat down, reviewed every page, and tightened our case with a bow. The motion now included felony-level fraud, not just civil deceit. Levi wouldn't just lose the house. He'd lose everything he tried to build on it. I let Dorian handle the legal formalities. I had other plans. I drove out to 1347 Winslow Lane the next morning. It was strange pulling up to my own driveway only to see someone else's cheap lawn ornaments scattered across the yard. They had replaced my lavender bushes with tiki torches. A plastic flamingo leaned drunkenly next to the mailbox. Trash. All of it. I parked half a block away and walked slowly, feeling the concrete under my shoes like old memory. Levi was inside. I knew that because Trisha's beat-up Honda was in the driveway and the living room lights were on. I walked straight up to the door and knocked. I didn't plan to talk. I just wanted him to see me here. Now. It took a minute. Then the door opened. Levi stood there in a wrinkled t-shirt holding a can of hard seltzer, eyes already wide. "Leela." I didn't say a word. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and handed it to him. He took it, opened it. His lips moved as he read. "Notice of repossession. Temporary injunction. Pending investigation. Immediate eviction required." "You wait, you're serious." I turned to leave. "Leela. Lila, come on, we're family," he shouted after me. "I just needed a break. I thought you were done with the house." I stopped at the edge of the driveway and turned halfway toward him. "You thought wrong." That night, I stayed at the hotel and received confirmation that law enforcement had delivered official notice to the premises. Levi had 72 hours to vacate pending investigation. 3 years of law school, 10 years in litigation, and it was this moment, watching that signature of mine burn away everything they thought they'd stolen, that made every sleepless night worth it. They thought I was too far away to matter, but I never left. I just waited. And now Levi was the one running out of time. Eviction notices are ugly little things. They're not dramatic, like in movies. No flashing red lights or sheriffs with mirrored sunglasses. Just paper tape, and silence. But the silence, that's the part that hits hardest. The kind that swells like shame when your neighbors start to notice. I didn't show up the morning Levi was officially served. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to brunch. Real brunch. The kind with mimosas and eggs Benedict, and people laughing over nothing important. I let the sun hit my face through the cafe window and read a paperback novel I had no intention of finishing. Meanwhile, back at 1347 Winslow Lane, Levi was pacing a driveway that didn't belong to him, arguing with a very polite county officer who couldn't care less about his Instagram credentials. I only know this because a neighbor, Mrs. Chan, 2 doors down, texted me a video. "Glad to see you're back, Lila. You handled it classily. Took this just in case you wanted a souvenir." In the video, Levi waved a document around like it might become valid through sheer motion. Trisha stood behind him, arms crossed, whispering harshly, probably something like, "I told you this was dumb." And then I noticed something in the background of the video that stopped me cold. My grandfather's desk. It had been in the study, solid oak carved by hand. He'd gifted it to me before he passed. Said May, "Your words always carry weight." Seeing it through that camera lens sitting there behind a man who forged my name to claim what wasn't his, made something click in me. Brunch was over. I called Dorian. "We're pressing criminal," I said. "You sure?" I was thinking civil, but now I'm sure. Understood. "I'll file tomorrow." It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about message, about legacy, about the lesson people like Levi don't learn unless it costs them more than they planned to take. That night, Levi texted again. "Can we please just talk? You already have the house. Do you really have to ruin me?" Funny how they always call it ruin when they finally meet consequences. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Chris Paxton again, my cyber forensic guy, and gave him a new target. "Can you track all outgoing payments from Levi's Home Flipping LLC?" He nodded. "Sure." "You think he moved other properties through it?" "I think he tried, and I think if we follow the cash, we'll find a pattern." 3 days later, Chris called me. Jackpot. Turns out Levi had used the same fake signature strategy to transfer a rental property from a retired aunt who now lived in assisted care. Same notary, same co-working IP address, same LLC. It was all unraveling now, and I was holding the loose thread. We added it to the criminal motion. Multiple counts. Elder fraud, wire fraud, document forgery, real estate theft, intent to deceive. It became a legal Christmas tree, every charge hanging like an ornament, brightly polished, ready to present to the prosecutor's office. And then came the best part. Because of my still active power of attorney, I didn't just have the right to file and reclaim the home. I had legal access to review and override any financial transactions involving property Levi moved under my name. And that included a personal loan application he submitted under false pretenses using my deed as proof of equity. I filed a fraud report with the lender. The loan was revoked. Interest charges frozen. Bank account flagged. It was a quiet earthquake. No headlines. No police sirens. But in Levi's world, everything began to shake. One night, I got an email from Trisha. Not a DM, an actual email. "I didn't know. He told me you gave him the house. Said you signed it over." I swear I didn't know. I almost deleted it. Then I read the next line. "He's trying to move the rest of the funds. Said he'd flee to Belize if it gets worse. Check the second LLC, attach the name." I blinked. She gave me the name of a second shell company, one we hadn't caught yet. Either guilt got to her, or Levi betrayed her too. Doesn't matter. I had what I needed. With that final lead, Dorian and I expanded the case into full-blown federal jurisdiction. The moment interstate wire transfer fraud entered the picture, it stopped being family drama. It became criminal enterprise. I submitted every document, every receipt, every signature analysis, and finally sent Levi a message. "I suggest you lawyer up." He didn't respond, but I knew he read it. Read it from the burner phone he thought I didn't know about. Read it while the walls he built out of lies finally began to crack. Levi didn't go quiet. He went louder. He started posting vague Instagram stories. Dark photos of whiskey glasses, blurry skyline shots, captions like "Trust is a lie" and "Everyone gets betrayed eventually." I rolled my eyes. People like Levi don't know how to lose with dignity. They only know how to perform damage control when the walls start caving in. And he must have known deep down that they were caving in fast. Because the next thing I received was a cease and desist. From his lawyer. A poorly worded, half-baked letter accusing me of harassment, defamation, and intentional emotional harm. It was almost cute, like watching a toddler throw a plastic sword and shout, "I'm a knight." I scanned the document once, then forwarded it to Dorian with a 2-word note. "Let's dance." And we did. We filed our formal rebuttal the next day, attaching a full affidavit of my POA rights timeline of events and the forensic evidence from Chris Paxton. Dorian's language was surgical, measured, elegant, lethal. It politely reminded Levi's attorney that false cease and desist letters designed to intimidate lawful property owners could themselves be considered harassment. We CC'd the state bar just for fun. 3 days later, I got an email from Levi's attorney. My client has elected to withdraw the cease and desist request. No apology, no explanation. Just silence trying to cover shame. I almost felt bad for the guy. The attorney, imagine taking on a case only to find out your client committed real estate fraud with receipts. But I wasn't done. I had one last move to make something I'd held back from for weeks. The civil suit. See, everything so far had been criminal action, getting the house back halting, the fraud, freezing assets. But the personal costs, the stress, the time, the risk, that had value. And I was going to make Levi pay for every second of it. So we filed a personal suit for damages, loss of equity, legal fees, emotional distress, defamation, and most deliciously theft of personal property. Because remember that oak desk, my grandfather's desk? That wasn't covered under real estate recovery. It had been stolen. And that one piece of furniture added another $15,000 to the lawsuit. Levi predictably didn't respond. His attorney tried to negotiate. "Can we settle?" he asked Dorian. Dorian asked me. I said no. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about proof. That I wasn't just someone you could write off while she was halfway across the world. That being gone didn't mean being powerless. That the quiet ones remember everything, especially betrayal. It was around this time that Trisha went public. She posted a tearful live video claiming she had no idea what Levi had done, saying she thought they were building a life together. Her video went viral in a small way, mostly among their mutuals. But the damage was done. She posted a final statement. "I've left. I won't be part of whatever happens next." I didn't know whether to thank her or pity her, but she gave me the final piece I needed. A signed deposition confirming Levi forged my signature and knowingly misrepresented the sale as legitimate. Under oath, admissible in court. We sealed the case. Meanwhile, Levi disappeared. Deleted his socials. Shut down the LLC. Fell off the radar. The court date came. He didn't show. I won by default. Full repossession of the property, $82,000 in damages awarded, and a permanent mark on Levi's financial record that would follow him like a tattoo made of bad choices. 2 days after the judgment, I went back to the house. Not to move in. I didn't want it anymore. I had already purchased a sleek penthouse in DC, something more fitting to where I was now emotionally and professionally. But I did want one thing: the desk. I walked through the mostly empty house, now court-ordered, back into my name. The air smelled like stale beer and bad decisions. I found the desk still in the study, a pile of Levi's unopened mail sitting on top. I cleared it with the back of my arm, ran my hand along the edge, and whispered what my grandfather once told me. "May your words always carry weight." Then I called a mover. Told them to take only the desk. Leave everything else. I left the front door open as I walked out. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't care. Let the wind take the rest. After the judgment, I figured that would be the end of it. But revenge has a way of echoing, not loud like thunder, but quiet like footsteps in the next room. The kind that makes you turn around even when you know you're alone. 3 weeks after I walked out of 1347 Winslow Lane for the last time, I received a call. Unknown number. East Coast area code. I answered on instinct. "Missy Ashcroft," a woman's voice asked. "This is Emily Rhodes, Assistant District Attorney for Prince George's County. We're currently reviewing documents related to the case you filed against Mr. Levi Ashcroft." My heart didn't skip. It stepped into gear. "I'm aware of the case," I said carefully. "We've received flagged documentation from the state registrar's office. It appears that Mr. Ashcroft may have been involved in multiple fraudulent transfers, some crossing state lines. We're preparing to open a larger investigation. So it wasn't just me, not just my deed. Levi had made a pattern out of this. Predatory targeting of elderly relatives, vulnerable renters, even a widowed neighbor who didn't speak fluent English. He had forged their signatures, moved properties through fake LLCs, flipped them for cash, and used the proceeds to fund a lifestyle that looked a lot better on social media than it did in court. I leaned back in my chair, the city skyline glowing behind me. My new place, my real home, was quiet, clean, safe. I'd be happy to cooperate, I told the ADA. Would you like the full forensic file? There was a pause. You have one? I smiled. Of course I do. I sent over the Paxton report, Dorian's court records, and even a few screenshots I hadn't used in my own trial insurance fraud, double dipping on damage claims, and one spectacularly idiotic attempt to write off a drone camera as a business expense. That was the day I stopped being just the victim. I became the catalyst. They opened a grand jury investigation, and Levi. They found him living out of a rental under an alias in Jersey. The cops picked him up on a Tuesday morning while he was trying to buy crypto at a strip mall cafe. I didn't go to the hearing. I didn't need to. Sometimes revenge isn't in the moment, it's in the ripple. In knowing that a single unrevoked document left behind like a forgotten chess piece brought down someone who thought they were too slick to lose. But I wasn't done reclaiming my narrative. A month later, I sat down for coffee with a real estate law professor at Georgetown. We'd crossed paths once at a conference. I told her my story not as a sob story, but as a case study. She listened carefully. That she said tapping her notebook should be a required case for every first-year law student. Real property, POA leverage, cyber evidence, criminal escalation. All of it. Use it, I said. Just keep my name off the syllabus. And she did. Last week I got an email from a 1L student at Georgetown. Ms. Ashcroft. I just wanted to thank you. Your case changed how I think about power, not just legally, but emotionally. I used to think silence meant weakness. Now I know it's just the sound before the strike. I didn't cry, but I closed my laptop and sat still for a long time. Because in the end, I didn't just get my house back. I didn't just win in court or even destroy Levi's fraud operation. I did something quieter, something deeper. I reclaimed the narrative, and I turned their betrayal into a legacy. One forged signature at a time. The investigation into Levi became a slow-burn wildfire, quiet, methodical, and absolutely relentless. By the time federal agents finished tracing the shell companies he'd used, they had connected him to at least 6 fraudulent property transfers, 3 interstate wire transfers, and 1 elderly woman's missing retirement savings. He had moved fast, too fast. No patience, no real structure. Just a hungry rat scrambling through a maze of shortcuts. And when you move like that, you leave a trail. Meanwhile, I stayed still. Stillness has power. Stillness lets people forget you're there until it's too late. While the state and federal attorneys dug through Levi's wreckage, I went back to Tokyo. Ironically, the same city I had been in when this entire story started. I was consulting on a corporate acquisition between a Japanese robotics firm and a Swiss defense contractor. It was sharp, high-stakes work, but compared to the emotional mess I'd just walked through, it felt like kindergarten. The truth is, I needed the work, not for the money. For the control, there's something deeply healing about reading a 120-page acquisition clause and knowing exactly how every word protects you. Law doesn't lie. People do. But while I was in Tokyo, something surprising happened. Dorian emailed me. FYI, Trisha's attorney reached out. She's formally requesting to provide testimony to strengthen the state's case against Levi. Looks like she's flipping. I tilted my phone and reread the message. Trisha, the same girl who had twirled in my kitchen on TikTok while sipping boxed wine. The same one who had laughed as Levi posted my castle now under a photo of my fireplace. Now she wanted to switch teams. I didn't trust her, but I didn't need to. The facts were already mine. If she wanted to throw Levi under the bus, I'd hand her the keys. A week later, her testimony dropped. In a 17-page sworn affidavit, she detailed everything. Levi's forgeries, the burner phones, the crypto wallets, the late-night calls with fake names, even a recording of Levi bragging that POA only matters if they know you still have it. He knew the power of attorney existed, and he gambled that I'd forgotten. That clip alone changed everything. Intent. The magic word. Intent proved criminal liability. It removed mistake from the table. No more pretending he misunderstood. He knew and he did it anyway. The state attorney called me directly this time. Miss Ashcroft, are you willing to appear as a key witness if this goes to trial? I didn't hesitate. Yes. And just like that, I was back in the arena. But this time, not as a plaintiff. Not even as a victim. As a closer, trial preparation began in earnest. Dorian coached me through deposition rehearsals. Chris Paxton backed up every digital timestamp. Trisha's testimony gave us narrative color. And I brought the weight. I was a corporate litigator with 10 years of courtroom presence and a bone-deep sense of betrayal. If they wanted fireworks, I could give them the whole damn 4th of July. But the thing is, Levi never made it to trial. On the eve of the preliminary hearing, he took a plea deal. 2 years in federal prison. $120,000 in restitution. Permanent disqualification from holding real estate licenses or forming investment entities. I didn't smile when I heard the news. I just breathed. Because that was the real win. Not the money, not the house, not even the prison time. The real win was that the law had spoken louder than Levi ever could. It had taken my silence, my stillness, my restraint, and turned it into a verdict. I flew home that weekend and stood once more at the edge of the lawn of 1347 Winslow Lane. The new owners had landscaped it differently. No more flamingos, no more tiki torches. Just a clean stone path, a cherry blossom tree, and wind chimes that didn't sound like regret. I walked away without knocking. I didn't need to enter that house again. I'd already taken back everything that mattered. The investigation into Levi became a slow-burn wildfire, quiet, methodical, and absolutely relentless. By the time federal agents finished tracing the shell companies he'd used, they had connected him to at least 6 fraudulent property transfers, 3 interstate wire transfers, and 1 elderly woman's missing retirement savings. He had moved fast, too fast. No patience, no real structure. Just a hungry rat scrambling through a maze of shortcuts. And when you move like that, you leave a trail. Meanwhile, I stayed still. Stillness has power. Stillness lets people forget you're there until it's too late. While the state and federal attorneys dug through Levi's wreckage, I went back to Tokyo. Ironically, the same city I had been in when this entire story started. I was consulting on a corporate acquisition between a Japanese robotics firm and a Swiss defense contractor. It was sharp, high-stakes work. But compared to the emotional mess I'd just walked through, it felt like kindergarten. The truth is, I needed the work. Not for the money. For the control. There's something deeply healing about reading a 120-page acquisition clause and knowing exactly how every word protects you. Law doesn't lie. People do. But while I was in Tokyo, something surprising happened. Dorian emailed me. FYI, Trisha's attorney reached out. She's formally requesting to provide testimony to strengthen the state's case against Levi. Looks like she's flipping. I tilted my phone and reread the message. Trisha? The same girl who had twirled in my kitchen on TikTok while sipping boxed wine. The same one who had laughed as Levi posted my castle now under a photo of my fireplace. Now she wanted to switch teams. I didn't trust her, but I didn't need to. The facts were already mine. If she wanted to throw Levi under the bus, I'd hand her the keys. A week later, her testimony dropped. In a 17-page sworn affidavit, she detailed everything. Levi's forgeries, the burner phones, the crypto wallets, the late-night calls with fake names. Even a recording of Levi bragging that POA only matters if they know you still have it. He knew. He knew the power of attorney existed, and he gambled that I'd forgotten. That clip alone changed everything. Intent. The magic word? Intent proved criminal liability. It removed mistake from the table. No more pretending he misunderstood. He knew, and he did it anyway. The state attorney called me directly this time. Miss Ashcroft, are you willing to appear as a key witness if this goes to trial? I didn't hesitate. Yes. And just like that, I was back in the arena. But this time not as a plaintiff, not even as a victim, as a closer. Trial preparation began in earnest. Dorian coached me through deposition rehearsals. Chris Paxton backed up every digital timestamp. Trisha's testimony gave us narrative color, and I brought the weight. I was a corporate litigator with 10 years of courtroom presence and a bone-deep sense of betrayal. If they wanted fireworks, I could give them the whole damn 4th of July. But the thing is, Levi never made it to trial. On the eve of the preliminary hearing, he took a plea deal. 2 years in federal prison, $120,000 in restitution, permanent disqualification from holding real estate licenses or forming investment entities. I didn't smile when I heard the news. I just breathed. Because that was the real win. Not the money, not the house, not even the prison time. The real win was that the law had spoken louder than Levi ever could. It had taken my silence, my stillness, my restraint, and turned it into a verdict. I flew home that weekend and stood once more at the edge of the lawn of 1347 Winslow Lane. The new owners had landscaped it differently. No more flamingos, no more tiki torches, just a clean stone path, a cherry blossom tree, and wind chimes that didn't sound like regret. I walked away without knocking. I didn't need to enter that house again. I'd already taken back everything that mattered. After the case closed, people started calling me lucky. Friends, colleagues, even the occasional distant relative who hadn't spoken to me in years. Lucky you had that power of attorney still active. Lucky you had evidence. Lucky you were a lawyer. They meant well, but I hated the word. Lucky is what people say when they don't want to admit they didn't see it coming. What happened wasn't luck. It was vigilance. It was memory. It was choosing to prepare, even when I hoped I'd never need to. But mostly it was one thing: boundaries. The kind of boundaries no one teaches you how to draw between family and survival, between forgiveness and protecting your name. That was what this whole ordeal was really about. See, Levi didn't just steal a house. He tested a boundary. He assumed proximity meant permission. That, because we shared blood, I'd be too polite, too slow, too far away to fight back. He wasn't just wrong. He was reckless. I had grown up in a family where secrets were currency and silence was expected. My uncle had once borrowed a cousin's identity to apply for a credit card. An aunt had faked documents to gain early inheritance. Everyone had a story, but no one ever called it what it was. Fraud, theft, manipulation. We just called it family business. So when Levi forged my name, I wasn't shocked. I was just activated. The muscle memory kicked in. The buried instincts. The voice inside that said, "Not this time. Not me." And I made a promise to myself. This is where it ends. This is where the bloodline excuses stop. After Levi was sentenced, I gave one interview anonymously for a legal podcast. They wanted a voice for a series on POA abuse and intrafamily fraud. I kept it professional, factual. But when they asked me what advice I had for listeners, I didn't hesitate. Never assume paperwork is boring. Your safety lives in the fine print, and your silence can either protect your peace or cost you everything. The episode went semi-viral in legal circles. A few younger lawyers reached out afterward. Some had experienced similar betrayals. Others just wanted to know how I stayed so composed. Truth, I didn't. There were nights in Tokyo where I stared at the wall until sunrise. Nights when I imagined burning everything down, calling Levi, screaming, making a scene. But I never did. Because screaming doesn't change ownership. Documents do. One of the final things I did before closing the book on this chapter was revise my estate plan. I went over every clause, every power, every named party. I updated the language to ensure it could never be misused again, even by someone I loved. Especially by someone I loved. And then I wrote a letter. Not to Levi. To myself, it was short. Next time, trust the silence. It always tells you who's watching and who's waiting to take what isn't theirs. I folded it, tucked it into the back of my grandfather's desk drawer, the only item I'd taken from Winslow Lane. A keepsake, a reminder. That home isn't a structure. It's a line you draw in the sand and dare someone to cross. And when they do, you answer. The strange thing about revenge is how quiet it becomes once it's over. There are no fireworks, no applause, no dramatic slow clap at the end of it all. Just silence. And if you're lucky, peace. But even peace is suspicious at first. Like you don't trust the stillness. You keep waiting for another knock at the door, another forged signature, another betrayal wrapped in a familiar name. It took me months to adjust. Even after Levi was convicted, even after the damages were paid in staggered bitter checks, each one a reminder that consequences had teeth. I still flinched when I got an email from a family member, still side-eyed every unopened letter with my name printed in all caps. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just steal your assets. It tries to colonize your trust. But I wasn't going to let it win. I started rebuilding not my portfolio, but my personal boundaries. I stopped answering messages from extended family, not out of malice, but out of necessity. You only get burned so many times before you learn to stop handing people matches. One day, I ran into Aunt Lorraine at a conference downtown. She wasn't part of the case, but she'd heard about it. Everyone had, and like all gossip that filters through family lines, the story had mutated. Some said I'd lied to steal the house back. Others said I'd fabricated the documents. One even said I used AI to fake Levi's confession. Aunt Lorraine, for her part, just pursed her lips and said, "You didn't have to take it so far, you know. He's family." I stared at her for a moment. Then I said, "Exactly." She didn't reply, just adjusted her scarf and walked away, like her opinion was the final word. It wasn't, because here's the thing. No one wants to admit about family. You can love someone and still keep them out of your house. You can care and still take them to court. You can forgive eventually but never forget. That was my version of healing. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted clarity. I wanted a life where my name, my work, my signature meant something only I could authorize. And slowly I began to feel that again. In Tokyo, I started saying no to deals that didn't sit right with me. I stopped letting partners steamroll meetings. I raised my rates. I mentored 2 young women from my alma mater, bright, fierce, hungry, and taught them the same lesson I learned the hard way. Protect your name. That's your currency. That's your armor. One night, while organizing old files on my laptop, I stumbled across a folder I hadn't opened since the day I landed back in the States. It was the forensic report Chris Paxton's full breakdown of the fraud timeline. I hovered over the delete button, then stopped. Instead, I dragged it into a new folder titled, "In Case I Forget." Because someday I might. We all do. We soften. We romanticize. We convince ourselves the warning signs weren't that bright, that maybe it wasn't so bad. But it was that bad. And I wasn't going to let memory betray me the way Levi did. That was my final act of control, not over him, but over myself. That's the thing about getting justice. It doesn't erase the past. It just gives it a place to rest, neatly filed, labeled, contained. And once it's there, you can finally move forward. Without fear. There's a strange power in knowing how people underestimated you. Not the obvious kind, not the kind that demands validation or screams "I told you so." No, it's subtler. It's like walking into a room and noticing everyone rearranging themselves when they realize you're not who they thought you were. That's what began to happen after the case. Not just with family, with everyone. At work, people who once talked over me in meetings started asking for my opinion first. Senior partners who had barely remembered my name now cited my handling of the Ashcroft case like it was textbook strategy. Clients, especially women, started requesting me by name, saying they'd heard I handle things with precision. I didn't correct them. Precision was exactly what it was. Revenge by precision. Recovery by design. One of the most surreal moments came at a real estate law seminar in D.C. I wasn't scheduled to speak. I was there as an attendee to quietly sip coffee and scan for emerging litigation trends. But when the panel began discussing POA misuse in property fraud cases, one of the speakers, an Ivy League professor, paused mid-slide and said, "Actually, one of the most fascinating cases I've read in the past year didn't come out of New York or California. It came right here from Maryland. Private case, but brilliantly executed. Power of attorney reclaimed. Asset reversal. Cross-state legal leverage. Whoever crafted that case knew exactly what they were doing." He didn't know I was in the room. I didn't raise my hand. Didn't say a word. I just sipped my coffee and made a mental note to raise my consultation rate by 15%. Later that evening, I walked through the streets of Georgetown heels, clicking against cobblestone, and realized this was the version of me Levi didn't think could exist. Not the overworked lawyer trying to be respected at family dinners. Not the polite cousin who brought dessert and ignored side comments about being too intense. No. This version, unapologetic, sharp, silent when it mattered, and devastating when it counted. And with all that growth, all that recovery, came one last surprise. A letter. An actual letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name in shaky cursive. I opened it slowly. It was from Levi. Leela, I know there's no excuse for what I did. I'm not asking for anything. But I need you to know I wasn't trying to ruin you. I really thought you wouldn't come back. I thought I could fix it before it got serious. I didn't realize what I was up against. You were always the smart one. I just didn't know how smart. I'm sorry. Levi. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly, walked over to the fireplace in my penthouse and lit a match. The paper curled slowly, the ink shrinking in on itself like guilt turning into ash. I didn't need his apology. The justice system had already done what words couldn't. But I did appreciate one thing. That last line. I didn't realize what I was up against. Neither did I. Until I had to become it. And now, I carry that version of myself into every room I enter. Not loud. Not cruel. Just undeniable. That's the best part about this kind of revenge. It doesn't burn bridges. It rebuilds you. Stronger. Smarter. Sharper than before. After the fire consumed Levi's letter, I stood there for a moment watching the smoke twist up the chimney like something being erased. Not forgotten, just released. There was nothing left he could say that would change the facts. But there was one more thing I had to do, something that had nothing to do with lawsuits or real estate or courtrooms. I needed to visit the person who had taught me the importance of names of documents, of doing things the right way the first time. My grandfather. He'd been gone for years now, but his grave wasn't far. A small, modest stone in a quiet cemetery tucked behind a church. The kind of place people forget exists unless they're looking for it. I went early. No fanfare. No flowers. Just me. And the original deed to 1347 Winslow Lane, my name restored intact whole. I folded it gently and placed it against the base of the headstone, anchoring it with a smooth river stone. I didn't say much. I just stood there, letting the silence speak. I remembered his voice clearly. Protect what's yours, even if it means standing alone. And I think that's why I never felt truly angry at Levi, not the deep primal rage people expect. What I felt was betrayal mixed with confirmation. Like I had always known something like this would happen. That the lesson had always been coming. I just didn't expect it to arrive with my own blood behind it. But standing there at my grandfather's grave, I realized something else. This wasn't just a family drama. This was a generational pattern I'd just shattered. Levi wasn't the first to blur the line between favor and fraud. But he would be the last, at least in my orbit. And that meant something. I left the cemetery with a quiet mind and an even quieter heart. A few days later, I received a package in the mail. No return label, but I knew who it was from before I opened it. Inside, a manila envelope with a check for $3,000, a note that simply read, "From Trisha." For the desk, I know what it meant. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I had it framed. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. The acknowledgement that even people who played accomplice can learn. That sometimes the most powerful consequence isn't punishment, it's realization. Trisha had seen the whole picture, and she chose to step away instead of doubling down. That didn't make her a saint, but it made her human. And maybe that was the real difference between her and Levi. He thought proximity was permission. She learned proximity is privilege. A few weeks after that, I was invited to guest lecture at my old law school. Topic: the personal side of real estate law. I agreed on one condition: that no cameras were allowed. I didn't want to be a viral clip. I wanted to be real. When I stepped into that room and saw a sea of notebooks, laptops, wide eyes, I felt a little like I had stepped back in time. Like I was looking at the version of myself who still believed being quiet was the same as being safe. I opened with one sentence: "Your signature is a weapon. Learn how to use it." And then I told them the story. Not with drama, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because clarity once earned is the sharpest tool in any lawyer's arsenal. Afterward, one of the students came up and said, That was better than any case study we've read. I smiled and said, that's because it wasn't a case. It was my life. And unlike a case, I won. By the time summer rolled around, I had stopped checking for updates on Levi's situation. Not out of indifference, but because it was over. The legal part. The personal part. All of it. What remained was mine, and what was his. Well, that was between him and whatever version of himself he had to live with now. But closure, I've found, doesn't come in a straight line. It comes in circles, quiet, returns to familiar places, unexpected reminders, unfinished echoes. One such reminder came in the form of an invitation, a formal one. You are cordially invited to the Ashcroft family reunion, Saturday, July 15th. I stared at it, sitting like a dare in the middle of my desk. The same family that had whispered about me taken sides stayed silent as Levi plundered my property, now inviting me back for potato salad and lawn chairs. Bold. At first I laughed. Then I considered throwing it away. But instead I put it in my desk drawer. Not because I planned to go, but because it reminded me of something I needed to finish. There was still one more person I hadn't spoken to since the beginning. My mother. She wasn't involved in Levi's scheme. But she had known, not the details, but the general drift. I found out from a neighbor that she'd been concerned when Levi mentioned I'd gifted him the house, and yet she'd never called, never asked. That silence cut deeper than the fraud. It said, "You're strong enough to handle it. We don't need to get involved." And maybe I was, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. So I drove to her place one Sunday afternoon without calling first. The front porch still creaked in the same spot it had when I was 13. The wind chimes still sounded like summer. But the feeling in my chest wasn't nostalgia, it was resolve. She opened the door, surprised. "Leela," she said softly, "you look tired." I gave a small smile. "I'm not. Just finished something big." We sat at her kitchen table, 2 mugs of lukewarm tea between us. And after a few minutes of catching up, I asked, "Why didn't you call me?" She looked away, hands folded, and said the thing I had always suspected. "Because I knew you'd fix it, and I didn't want to make it worse." I nodded slowly. "But silence doesn't make things better either." She met my eyes then. "I know." That was all. No big apology. No tearful reconciliation. Just "I know," and for once, that was enough. I left feeling lighter, not absolved, but understood, or at least seen. Later that night, I RSVP'd to the reunion. No, not attending. No need to explain. Some invitations are sent out of habit, not hope. And some responses speak louder in their brevity. Instead, I spent that weekend exactly how I wanted. Alone on my balcony, overlooking the city I had earned. My desk was behind me, the same one that had seen years of contracts, court orders, and a war fought silently from abroad. And I opened a fresh legal pad. Not for work, for writing. Something personal, something clear. A draft titled, "What They Forgot When They Took the Deed." Because I realized in all of this, I wasn't just a survivor of legal betrayal. I was a witness. And witnesses, when they speak, have power. Writing that piece, "What They Forgot When They Took the Deed," was supposed to be for me a quiet form of release. A way to contain the storm and label it neatly. Closed. But somehow it didn't stay small. I posted it anonymously on a professional legal blog, a niche platform where lawyers shared case studies, reflections, and courtroom strategies. I left out names, dates, and personal identifiers. Just the raw anatomy of betrayal and the legal precision it took to unravel it. It was live for 3 days before it blew up. I woke up to over 100 emails in my inbox. Some were lawyers praising the clarity and structure. Others were law students saying it felt like reading a novel, one that taught them more than their textbooks. But the messages that hit hardest were the ones from people like me. My brother forged my name on our parents' trust. I didn't know what to do until now. Reading your story made me pull out my POA files. I found a huge mistake. Thank you. You reminded me that silence doesn't mean surrender. The piece had gone viral in the most unexpected corner of the internet, among professionals who had seen similar shadows in their lives, but hadn't found the words for it. And suddenly my words were theirs. That's when a woman named Victoria Moore contacted me. She ran a legal education nonprofit that focused on empowering women to understand property law and asset protection. She wanted to publish my piece as part of a wider campaign. "We don't need you to go public," she said over Zoom. "Just your mind. Just your voice." I agreed. They retitled the piece for public distribution. The signature they forgot I still owned. It was perfect. Clean. Sharp. Echoing with power. And with that, I stepped into a new chapter, not of litigation, not of vengeance, but of witnessing, of teaching, of making sure the next woman somewhere across the world didn't have to fight this kind of war alone. At a fundraising gala hosted by the nonprofit, I gave a brief speech, still anonymous, still guarded. But in my closing line, I let myself speak freely. They tried to erase me with a signature, but they forgot I wrote the first line. And I'll write the last. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was the fire in their eyes, the recognition, the silent collective understanding that we were more than case numbers. We were architects of our own narrative. After the event, I sat outside under the warm D.C. night sky, the Potomac whispering in the distance. I thought of 1347 Winslow Lane, of my grandfather, of Trisha's trembling letter, of Levi's smug grin the moment it cracked, of Dorian, of Chris, of myself. The old version of me would have seen the whole ordeal as a loss, a trauma, a thing to bury, but not now. Now I saw it for what it truly was. Proof that silence isn't weakness, that distance isn't disconnection, that one woman with a memory and a single unrevoked power of attorney can burn an entire fraud to the ground and still walk away whole. No smoke, no flame, just the precision of paper. After the publication of the essay and my brief immersion in public advocacy, I expected things to quiet down. But they didn't. A week later, I received an official letter from the State Bar Association. Not disciplinary, not investigative, something better, an invitation. They were launching a new initiative to educate lawyers and the public on domestic property fraud and ethical boundaries in intrafamilial law. It was part CLE, part public service, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker at the inaugural conference. I stared at the envelope, rereading the words. They had no idea who I really was. My name still hadn't been attached to the piece publicly, but someone inside that organization had read my essay and seen more than a case study. They'd seen a story worth telling. I accepted. When I took the stage 2 months later, it wasn't with notes. It wasn't with slides. It was just me, a microphone, and the truth. I didn't name Levi. I didn't need to. The story spoke for itself. The law gives us tools, but it doesn't give us timing. That's up to us. And in my case, the most powerful tool wasn't what I filed, it was what I never revoked. One signature held in silence changed everything. The applause was thunderous, not because I was a hero, but because I was a mirror. Everyone in that room had either lived a version of it or feared they might one day. After the event, I was approached by a soft-spoken man in his 50s. He had gray at his temples and a name tag that read, Howard J. Lane Estate Attorney. He said, "You just described a case I'm working on." Almost word for word. I nodded. "Then you already know the ending." He exhaled. "I hope so." That's when I realized the power of what had happened wasn't just that I won. It was that the blueprint now existed. And it had come from someone they never expected, a woman alone, betrayed by family, armed with nothing but memory and paper. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and began outlining a book. Not fiction. Not a memoir either. A guide. Working title, Paper Shields. How to protect yourself from family, fraud, without burning bridges. Because there's a difference between setting things on fire and lighting your own path. The first chapter was titled simply, They Changed the Deed While I Was Abroad. Writing it didn't feel like reopening a wound. It felt like writing the last page of a book that had taken years to finish. And once I closed the file and powered down the laptop, I poured myself a small glass of red wine and stepped onto the balcony of my D.C. penthouse. The city shimmered below me, buildings like sentences, roads like punctuation, the quiet hum of life moving forward. I thought about Levi, about the weight of his choices, about how small they made him in the end, not because he failed, but because he thought success came from taking what wasn't his. And I thought about me, still standing, still silent but now seen. Not because I yelled, but because I never needed to. Because my revenge didn't come in screams or storms. It came in lines of text, black ink on white paper, and a name that, despite everything, never stopped being mine. They say revenge is best served cold, but I don't think that's quite right. Revenge, when done right, isn't cold. It's calculated, precise, surgical. It's not about rage. It's about restoration. And when the dust settles, when you've taken back what's yours, not just property, but dignity, you realize something powerful. You didn't just survive betrayal, you rewrote the ending. A year to the day after the original forged deed was filed, I stood in front of a new audience, this time at a university commencement. The keynote speaker had canceled last minute, and someone on the board, an old colleague of Dorian's, had read my published essay. They asked if I'd step in. "We need someone who understands consequence," he said. So I did. I looked out at rows of graduates in caps and gowns, faces bright with ambition and untouched failure. I thought about what I could tell them in 10 minutes that would actually matter. So I told them this: one day, someone you trust will test your boundaries. Not out of malice, but out of arrogance. They'll assume your silence is surrender. They'll believe that distance means you won't return. But if you remember who you are and what you've put in writing, then you won't need to yell. You won't need to beg. You'll just show up with receipts. And you'll win, not because you're loud, but because you were ready. It wasn't a traditional speech, but they listened. And when I walked off the stage, the applause followed me, not because I was a symbol, but because I was real. Proof that someone could be dismantled and still come back whole. Back home that evening, I opened a locked drawer in my grandfather's desk. Inside was a manila envelope I hadn't touched since the trial. The original notarized power of attorney, still valid, still intact, still signed in clean, deliberate ink, my initials in the lower corner, the curve of my A, unmistakably mine. I smiled and slid it back into place. Let it live there. A quiet reminder that knowing your own power is the ultimate protection. Not against theft, against forgetting. Now, when I speak to law students, I don't lead with the case. I start with a sentence. No one thinks it'll happen to them, until it does. And when it does, you'd better know where your papers are. That always gets their attention. Because deep down, we all know the most dangerous thieves are the ones who know where we keep the keys. I end every class, every talk, every message with the same line. Your name is your contract. Guard it like a signature. Defend it like your life. Because in the end, it is. And as for Levi, I haven't heard from him since the last restitution payment arrived, certified mail. No note. I didn't open it right away. Just stared at the envelope and thought, this is how the war ends. Not with a bang, but with a balance sheet. I filed it away. No anger. No sadness. Just closure. Because when they changed the deed while I was abroad, they made one critical mistake. They forgot about the power of attorney I never revoked. And they underestimated what a woman with memory, silence, and paperwork can do when pushed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I wrote history instead. They thought I was too far away to stop them. They forged my name, changed the deed to my home, and sold it while I was working in Tokyo. But they made one fatal mistake they forgot. I still held the original power of attorney. What followed wasn't just a legal battle. It was a masterclass in quiet revenge. I didn't confront them. I didn't yell. I used documents, timestamps, digital forensics, and a chessboard of legal leverage to take back what was mine, piece by piece, line by line. And in the end, I didn't just win the house. I exposed a deeper fraud, helped open a federal investigation, and ensured Levi, the cousin who thought betrayal was just business, faced real consequences. Prison, restitution, reputation collapse. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in reclaiming my narrative, turning silence into strength, turning betrayal into blueprint. This story is more than a personal victory. It's a warning and a lesson. Never underestimate the power of preparation. Never assume silence means weakness. And never forget, your name is your contract. Protect it, always. Subscribe to this channel for more true revenge stories that remind you. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous. If this story moved, you leave a comment below. We read every one. End of script. Good night.